I'm sure most of you, as English high school teachers, will agree with me that grammar is very important for us, isn't it? Yes or no? You can type in the chat
Mm,
box.
Yes,
yes,
yes.
Yeah, grammar is very important for us
obviously.
because
Obviously, it is
obviously,
very
yeah,
essential. Essential nowadays.
Yes, sir. Yes,
obviously,
sir.
obviously, because it's a part of our syllabus, isn't it? So even if you don't want it, because some teachers don't like grammar. Why I'm saying this is some teachers don't like grammar. They don't want to learn. They don't want to teach, right? So whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, grammar is a very essential part of high school syllabus. At least as primary teacher, you can take the possibility of not being good at grammar, because at primary level you don't teach much grammar, right? It's not a part of the syllabus, very active part of the syllabus. Maybe very small elements are there, but at the high school level, no matter which state you are in India, every state has its own textbook, but still grammar is there as a very active part of the high school syllabus. So because some teachers avoid grammar, they try to avoid grammar in the class, they try to manage somehow, because they are not comfortable with the grammar. So this notion, if anybody has, you need to quickly get away with it. I would request all of you, because grammar is very important for us. Once you are a teacher, even if you are a primary, high school, college, intermediate lecturer, PU lecturer, degree college teacher, whatever level you are, once you are a language teacher, grammar becomes very important. Why? Because you are not just when you are a teacher, you are not just a user of a language, you are teacher. So people expect some mastery from you. It's like you are the master in that language. You have a very good command over communication skills. So people have these expectations from you. The society, your administration, your management, your government, your parents, your students, all of them have such expectation, because you are not just English user, but you are an English teacher. That is where grammar comes into the picture. So having a thorough and sound understanding of grammar can help you understand language better, can help you correct your mistakes, can help you become a better communicator. That is why grammar is essential as teachers for you. Our students actually don't need grammar. When it comes to students or any users in general, they don't really need grammar, because mother tongue is the best example. You don't need grammar, you don't need learn grammar to learn a language. If you have exposure to a language, you will automatically, naturally learn the communication skills. Best proof is mother tongue, isn't it? I'm sure nobody here would argue that I have learned mother tongue. I have learned my mother tongue from grammar books, dictionaries, and
ನಾವು
uh,
ಗೊತ್ತಡೆ ವಿಶ್ ಕಳಿಸ್
my Kannada teacher, my Telugu teacher, my Tamil teacher, isn't it?
ಸ್ಟೇಟಸ್
ಹಂಗೇನ್ ಕಳ್ಸಿಲ್ಲ.
Parvati Patil, please mute yourself. You have opened your microphone and you are talking to somebody. Please avoid such disturbances. It is natural to happen, because we are not used to these online classes. Sometime by mistake that microphone button will open and we don't know, and all the voices around us, every 100 members, all these 110 teachers from South India will listen. Okay, so that is why you should be very conscious and careful while attending online classes.
Extremely sorry, sir. Extremely sorry.
No, you don't have to be extremely sorry, ma'am. I understand it happened without your notice. That is why I'm just using your case as an example to request everybody that when you are logged in, please be in the class. Some people, what they do is they just log in for the attendance and then they'll be doing their own works. That time they won't know whether their microphone is open or not, camera is open or not. That is why. Right. If you are really busy, don't log in. Don't log in. If you log in, listen and then be a part of the class actively and consciously. So that, yeah. Yeah, coming back to the discussion that we were having, yes. So grammar is very important because it helps us, it helps us language technically, because grammar is the technical knowledge of a language, right? So when you study this technical knowledge, when you are sound in this knowledge, you really understand how language works. What are the nuances of the language, you will understand. So this knowledge gives you a lot of confidence as a teacher and you can teach better. That is why do not think that you just need some grammar that is a part of syllabus. I just have to manage somehow to teach my students these areas. That's all. No. Grammar is like a science. Grammar is like the science of the language. Everything in grammar is interrelated, interconnected. Okay, the basics are connected to the higher aspects. For example, verbs. If you want to study tenses properly, you need to know about verbs properly. Without having a good understanding of verbs, you cannot learn tenses properly. Same way, you want to master active passive voice, that is directly connected to sentence structures and tenses. So unless you have a very good understanding of sentence structures, verbs, tenses, you can never really master an area like active passive voice. So if you cannot master properly, you cannot teach properly also. So in most of the classes, what happens is teachers don't put enough efforts to learn the complete area properly. They just learn only so much that is needed to manage the class to teach their students, because for them completing syllabus is the main objective. Unknowingly or knowingly, many teachers think I just have to teach, that's all. Whether students are learning, whether their learning is reflected in the exams or not, and is that knowledge helping the students improve their communication skills or not, all these things they don't. And first of all, do I understand this area correctly? Do I have a complete understanding of this area? These questions normally we don't ask ourselves, because the syllabus race is going on for years together in the schools. Many teachers knowingly, unknowingly think that my objective is means to teach syllabus, that's all. So grammar also, when it comes to, they will think that, okay, how much grammar should I know as a teacher? Only that much grammar that is there in the syllabus. No. So that's a wrong idea, because in grammar everything is connected. So you need to start with the basics and then slowly move ahead, move upwards. Nothing, nothing should be there as a gap in between, because these gaps will make it things difficult for you, for your own understanding. So if you do not understand completely, forget about teaching. You will not be able to teach whatever you want to teach in a better way. That is why there is no doubt, there is no debate on this, that teachers, high school teachers especially, need a very sound understanding of grammar. So always you should have good grammar books for reference. Right, in the one of the next classes I'll talk about some good books. I'll suggest some good grammar books for reference. We should always have the latest publications of good grammar books, so that whenever we have a doubt we can easily refer, and constantly refer and make sure whatever we teach is standard, right? Okay, so before we go into the concrete grammar items, the basic grammar items that I said I'll be discussing, I would like to first talk few general things about grammar and teaching grammar, because this theoretical knowledge is important for us as a teachers. Okay, so language, can you all see the slide here? Blue color slide, language usage. This is the slide. Yeah, Srinivas Rao, Srinivas Rao, sir. By mistake, I think you have opened your camera, because that will be a distraction for others. Yeah, thank you for switching off. Thank you. It's not that we don't want to see you, but we would love to see you. But the thing is, if one or two of you come accidentally in the video mode, it will be a distraction for others while the class is going on. I'm sorry for asking you to switch off. Fine. So yeah, so now we'll discuss some general things, theoretical aspects about teaching grammar before we actually talk about any grammar items. Okay, so I hope I am not very fast, but as I said, I will be fast, because my main objective is to talk about as many things as possible in 5 to 6 hours. So please make sure you pay attention. Yeah, so language usage. So grammar, we can also call another way as language usage, because grammar is all about how to use a language. Grammar is something that guides us how to use a language, how to use, how not to use. That is why we also use another word like language usage, means the way in which we use a language. That is what grammar describes, grammar studies, right? So how do we define grammar? If I ask all of you, how do you define grammar? Most of you will tell me the first definition here. True. That is also true. This is how we define grammar. Set of rules and regulations associated with a language. But this, as I said, is a very conventional way of looking at grammar. But grammar has, the way we look at grammar has changed a lot in the modern times. Because linguists have observed that languages change from time to time. Linguist means a linguist. I hope you know who is a linguist. Who is a linguist? Can somebody tell me? Who do we call as a linguist?
Who studies about language.
Who is
Wonderful.
studying about the language.
That's right. Wonderful. Somebody who studies a language is called it's simply scientist of a language. Just like scientists are in every field, the persons who study that subject as a study, those are called scientists. So the language scientists are nothing but linguists, a person who studies language systematically and scientifically. So these linguists have noticed that all languages change from time to time. So when languages are changing from time to time, shouldn't grammar also change from time to time? Yes or no? All languages
No,
change.
sir.
No?
No, sir.
Grammar will be same, but the techniques
Grammar
will be
same,
same.
but language can change, is it?
Techniques which we teach and the other things.
Okay, yeah, this is where we are wrong. Okay, when language changes, grammar also should change. And language doesn't change radically. Okay, let us understand. Changing language changes are natural process. It's a natural process. Languages don't change radically or dynamically, means in the sense they don't go a lot of change within 1 day or 1 month or 1 year. It takes a few months or a few years for small little changes to happen. But the point is, languages do change from time to time. So when we say languages change from time to time, what we mean is the way in which the languages are used changes from time to time. So naturally, grammar also should change. So again, when we say grammar should change, should entire grammar change? No, entire grammar will not change. Few modifications will happen in the grammar rules or principles. So the modern grammar is considered to be flexible concept, because language itself is not a rigid concept. Language itself is a dynamic and flexible aspect. So grammar, which is a part of a language, cannot be rigid, cannot be same. So all of us have to come out of this notion. Grammar can never be fixed and say, okay, this is the ultimate grammar and this should not change forever. No, grammar is a servant of a language. Please understand that. If the language is changing, grammar also will change, right? Okay. So modern grammar is considered to be very, very flexible concept. That is why we should, as teachers, we should never fix ourselves to conclusive rules of grammar. Just because René Martin says something is right, some other grammar book says something is right, we should always try to balance our understanding between grammar as knowledge and usage. Both are different. Grammar refers to the theoretical principles, but actual usage may be different. People use language according to their convenience. Because language is a tool. We use tools according to our convenience, isn't it? For example, you have smartphones. All of us don't use smartphones in the same way. Some of us use it more efficiently. Some of us use it very limitedly. For some of us, smartphone is just for making calls and making SMS. But if that is your purpose, you don't need a smartphone. Even a normal CDMA phone will do. But you don't think like that, because the trend is smartphone, so you have to use smartphone. So most of us don't use many features of it because we only want what we want. That's it. Only few people use most of the features in a smartphone. That is using the smartphone smartly, what I call, So it's not just owning a smartphone. You should be able to use it smartly also. So we should also be smart in order to use a smartphone smartly, right? So all of you agree with that, right? All of us don't use the smartphone in the same way. Similarly, language is also a tool. We use language according to our conveniences. That is why what happens is there will always be some difference between the actual grammar, which is standard, and then the way in which we use the language. This we cannot stop. Nobody can stop this process. There will always be some gaps in the sense. Okay, the only thing is we have to keep in mind is when you are speaking is informal, no? That time you don't have to be very grammatical. But when you are writing, when you are doing the mode of communication in the form of writing, because writing is more formal, then maybe you will have to be very conscious of grammar. But most of the time in real life, what do? We speak, isn't it? We informally communicate, and formal situations are very, very less. So we need to know grammar, but following grammar is always not essential, because in spoken English, meaning becomes primary, right? And moreover, we are teachers. We are talking about teaching. So we are dealing with formal contexts, okay? So formal context, we have to teach grammar. That is why grammar becomes important for us as teachers. Otherwise, as I said, our students don't really need to learn, grammar to learn a language. Exposure is what is enough. If they have exposure, slowly they will pick up English. But because we don't have English just like our mother tongue, that much of exposure is not there. We slowly introduce grammar as they grow up. That is why in high school we slowly start teaching, introducing grammar one after the other. So that way grammar becomes important for us as teachers. Jay Bharati madam has raised hands. Is it by accident or you have something to ask, Jay Bharati madam? Jay Bharati P has raised hands. I see a raised hand from you. Did it happen by mistake or you have something to ask? I don't think and she has anything to ask, so she's silent. So I'm lowering your hand. Okay. Yes. Yeah, Hari Ram says, sir, problem arises only when we start thinking if a change is. That's right. So that's a very good point. So Hari Ram has raised a point. The problem arises when we start thinking of change when it is right or wrong. That's a very important point that you have raised, because these changes are not in our hands, sir. Whenever a new usage comes up, a new word comes up, the right or wrong is the question that first we will get, because we come from such an environment. Grammar was always taught traditionally where we have to stick to grammar, otherwise we are wrong. But practically the thing is communication is what matters. It's not about right or wrong always. The question is not about right or wrong. The question is, have you communicated properly or not? If the communication has happened properly, you don't have to worry about right or wrong, isn't it? That's a very simple equation. Why do we learn language? In order to improve our communication skills, to be able to do communication better. So when you have communicated properly, why should you bother whether you are right or wrong? Right? This is some basic equation we need to understand. But then again, we are teachers. We are talking about classroom, school, formal setting. So in a formal setting, you have to teach grammar because it's a part of your syllabus. But the only point I'm trying to say is teach it in such a way that don't give it unnecessarily importance beyond its limitations, but prioritize exposure. Make sure your students are exposed to different things in the class. Listening, speaking, LSRW skills are practiced regularly rather than grammar. Grammar is just a small part. You are teaching it only from an examination point of view, though few things have to be kept in mind. The thing is, when you are judging your students' communication skills, pay more attention to the meaning rather than the grammar. Because grammar is not the end. Grammar is just one part of it. More than that, what is important is this: your students need to be meaningful. So can somebody be meaningful in spite of not being grammatical? Yes. When you have minimum sentence structures, when you have minimum vocabulary, you can communicate well even if you make a little bit of mistake. So grammar is a learning, it's a slow learning process. Don't expect your students to become overnight, make themselves correct overnight. So teach grammar, continue to teach grammar, but then whenever you are assessing students' writing or communication skills, give more importance to the meaning of their expression rather than grammar. Just grammar is a small part. So even when you are awarding marks, assessing your students' communication skills, give importance to grammar only as a small part, not the whole part. Give preference or priority to the meaning. This is the whole point, crux of this discussion. All right. Yeah. Now coming back to the definition. So that is why the second definition is a better definition of grammar, because grammar, modern linguists look at grammar as something very flexible. So the principles of language usage means nobody is the father of grammar, not even Renan Martin, not even Raymond Murphy. No individual is the authority. The principles, where should they come from? They should come from language usage, means how people are using in a particular language, the majority of them. Of course, here your question should come. Sir, can we consider anybody's language as correct usage? No. There are certain standards. When we say people, we are talking about educated people, educated and learned people. So the majority of them, how are they using the language? So that becomes the norm. That decides what is correct. Of course, certain basics of grammar will not change. For example, tenses. Every tense has a structure. Simple present tense, subject, verb, subject plus V1. Present continuous tense, subject plus ing form of the verb. These basics won't change. The usage keeps changing. Certain deviations will be there continuously. This is what I'm trying to say by changes. Change means not complete change. Basics will be the same, right? Sorry, Ram sir, is there any difference in the definitions? Yeah, I'm afraid I'm unable to find. Yeah, that's what, sir. The definition is these old rules and regulations. When you say, you are actually using very strong words. Rules, regulation means you have to follow them. There is no alternative. If you are not following them, you are doing something illegal. That is why we don't use this word rules and regulation anymore, Hariram sir. That is why a better way to define grammar is principles of language usage. Means nobody is the authority. The majority of the educated people, the way they use the language, that decides what is right, what is wrong. So that's why modern grammar has become very, very flexible. So modern grammar books, how are they written? These grammar book authors have to look at people. They should not write what they think is right. They have to look at people, public. How are they using a language? They should study, and then they should record the grammar principles. So the description of a language as it is used by its users means majority of the users. Right? Because in 100 members, if 10 members are using a different structure for a different meaning, that doesn't become standard. Majority. It should be majority. Right? So this change, this is a slight change that we need to understand that happened in the way we look at grammar. Principles of using a language. Simple. That's the simplest way to define grammar, which is more flexible, which makes the grammar flexible. All right? So, as I said, linguists have changed the way of looking at language. So as teachers, we also should understand these perceptions of grammar. So in olden days, look at this picture, look at this slide. I am moving the pointer. In olden days, rules were considered very, very important. So when language teachers were teaching grammar, teaching language, lot of rules were taught. And the assumption was that usage will be learned from rules. So if somebody is learning a language, they are learning for usage. But before that, what should they do? They should learn rules. This was the notion, old notion. So if somebody had to learn how to use a language, the thinking was that they have to learn a lot of rules. So that is why in the old education system, grammar was given a lot of importance. Undue importance means unnecessary importance. That is why even today, we come from that such as an education system. Even today, many teachers, knowingly or unknowingly, they put a lot of emphasis on grammar, which is not actually necessary. As I said, Language learning can happen without grammar also. Exposure is key for our students. So pay more attention to exposure. Give grammar only in its due place, due role, due time, not more. Okay? Don't overburden students with these technicalities. Whatever they need, that much, that's it. So this has to change now. Everybody should use language according to the rules. If they deviate from the rule, they are wrong. Rules are very important. So this approach of looking at grammar is called prescriptive approach. This is old one. Now we have moved from that prescriptive approach to descriptive approach. So what does the descriptive approach say? Look at this slide. Usage is important. So rules come from usage. So rules are dependent on usage, how people use that language. So completely the equation is reversed. Can you see the equation? It's reversed. It's totally opposite, totally changed, isn't it? That is why modern grammar is called descriptive grammar. Means rules emerge from language as it changes. So usage becomes very, very important. Clear? So now this is the theoretical part of it. Now let me give a practical example for us to understand this perception change. Because theory is easy to discuss and understand, but we need to relate it to the practical aspects. For example, I'll take the example from tense example. Okay, present continuous tense. Present continuous tense, what is the function? It is used to talk about ongoing action. All of us know that, isn't it? Because that's one of the easiest tenses and frequently used tenses. So present tense has a particular structure, verb structure, etc. Anything that is going on right now. I am talking, you are listening, he is running, whatever. Right? Whatever is going on right now. So initially present continuous only had one function, that is present continuous used to talk about ongoing. That's why present means now, right now. Continuous means ongoing. That's all. But for some strange reason, people started using present continuous to express future actions also. Many people you started using and many people started following. So modern usage, if you see, now more people use both the functions. That modern grammar has accepted this second function. For example, I'm going to Mysore tomorrow. Look at, you carefully analyze the structure. I am going to Mysore. That sentence is in present continuous tense. Okay. But since the adverb is tomorrow, you know that it is not present continuous. So present continuous in structure, but by function, it is actually a future action. So if you modern grammar book, and present continuous, it will say function number 1 used to talk about continuous action. Function number 2, it is also used to talk about planned future actions. So this is an example of prescriptive grammar versus descriptive grammar. So modern grammar is descriptive grammar. It looks at the usage and meaning rather than whether it is a standard rule or not. Right? I have some raised hands. Sharada madam, is that why you raised your hand? Okay, go ahead.
Shall I try one more example, sir?
Yes, you want to give one example? Go ahead.
Of course, I don't know whether it is right or wrong, but I'm trying.
You don't need to know. You don't need to know. Just go ahead. Say what you want to say.
Previously, in traditional grammar, we use shall with I.
Exactly.
We. Now we are using it with will. That's right.
Very good example. In the sense, actually, it's not previously. That is the standard. Yes. Shall is meant for I and we, but first person, that is first person singular and plural.
Yes.
But all the other subjects take will in the future, like you will, he will, she will. So people were finding it inconvenient to use shall only with I and we. So what did people do? Conveniently, they started using will with everything. So instead of I shall, we shall, they started saying I will, we will. That is why even today, if you see 90 9% of the people will say suddenly I will and we will. Not only people, even me, I am a grammar teacher. Even I also suddenly, if you look at my usage, I will say I will and we will only. Only when I am teaching, because I have to be more conscious. I will make sentences like I shall and we shall. Even now, just now I made the statement, I will make sentences. That also is I will.
Yes.
So you see, usage is that is why I said usage is very important. The way we use language majoritarily is more important than whether it is whether it is confined or complies with the standard grammar or not. Okay, so that is why we need to understand that modern grammar has become very, very flexible. So these are some changes that are examples of prescriptive versus descriptive. So if you are a prescriptive grammarian, means your perceptions are like old grammar, then you will say no, this is wrong because Renan Martin says this is wrong, so I don't accept this. No, that should not be the criteria. What should be the criteria? Look at people around you, look at how it is being used. If majority of people are using it, then you should consider it. You cannot just blindly say it is wrong. Okay,
Okay, sir.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Somebody else also has raised their hands, Padmavati and others. Is it by mistake or you want to ask or say something? If not, we'll go further. Okay, so I hope you understood this difference, old versus new perceptions of grammar, right? So we should not be prescriptive grammarians, right? In the sense, knowingly or unknowingly, we come from such an education system. So even today, many teachers think right or wrong. So in the chat box, I have read a previous one of our sir commented, no, sir, the problem is whenever a change happens, we think whether that change is right or wrong. So because that is our conditioning, sir. We come from a conventional education system. So whenever something comes to grammar, we always think whether it is right or wrong. But now hereafter we have to think it's not about right or wrong. It is about meaningful or, is it meaningful more than the grammar part? That's a very important point. Of course, when you are assessing grammar in the exam, you have to be correct. You have to stick to standards. That is different, because we are not teaching our students only spoken English. Okay, your students will learn better spoken English from the English movies that they watch than your and our English classes, right? Even if I teach English or you teach English, I'll make the same statement. They will learn more English from an English movie that they will watch, because they are interested in that movie and then they pay their attention there. Okay, whatever we teach in the class is not attractive for our students, because our way of teaching English are very conventional. We have some stories, syllabus in our stories, and we tell them that stories, and through those stories we teach them English. Sometimes those stories are not interesting for some of our students, or maybe story is interesting but we are not delivering it in an interesting fashion. Reasons can be many, but then your students will develop spoken English in many other ways, by reading, by watching, by listening, that is there. But in the classroom, yes, you're teaching grammar, when you're testing grammar exercises, yes, you have to stick to what is correct. But when they are communicating generally, like writing, composition, for example, or let us say when they are speaking, so you have to switch between these decisions. If your student is naturally talking, don't judge based on only grammar. Look at the meaning more. For example, writing composition. Writing composition, maybe you have 4 marks out of 10 marks for grammar. 6 marks should be for meaning. So that kind of criteria you should have. You cannot completely look at it from a grammar point of view and reduce all the 10 marks for all the mistakes. If that happens, then the meaning is ignored totally. Communication, main thing is meaning rather than grammar. So most of us, unknowingly or knowingly, we make these mistakes in the classroom when we assess students' performance, when we assess students' language in writing and in speech. So we should know what we are doing, when we are doing, why you are doing, right? These things, understanding these things can help us make better decisions. Srinivas Reddy and Krishnam Naidu have raised their hands. Anything you have to ask, sir? Sir, we can't hear you. Please mute yourself. There is some technical problem. We can't hear you. Srinivas Reddy, please mute yourself. Krishnam Naidu, yeah, go ahead.
Sir, there is no difference between I shall play and I will play. Is there any difference, sir?
There is no difference in meaning, but there is a difference in the sense when it comes to standard. If you are writing an exam, you should write I shall. But so, if your students are speaking, let them say I will instead of shall, because so in spoken English this different is accepted. But according to written English and standard English, even today shall is meant for I and we. So you have to train. Yeah, shall is the right word. Meaning wise they are same because both are used to express futurity.
But it indicates
I and we take shall.
Just a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
I will play. It indicates that is means confidence.
Yeah.
I shall play. It indicates possibility.
Yeah, possibility when you know the difference. But 90% people don't know this difference. They will just use them as future tense auxiliary verbs. So when you are using without knowledge, both are same for you. You are an English teacher, you know the difference, so you are differentiating. But not many people will be able to use it like that. Okay. So shall is just a future auxiliary, but will has determination. So when instead of shall, if I am using will, I have more determination. You are right. But 90% of the people, see, think about students as people, users. They are not teachers like us. They don't go into these fine nuances and differences, etc. Right? So that way, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Srinivas Reddy, I'm very sorry because there was a lot of disturbance. I don't know why when you opened your microphone, it happens sometimes. So maybe you can try later and ask your doubt or just put your doubt in the chat box, Srinivas Reddy, sir. I'll try to address it. Okay. All right. Next is, so this difference you have understood, right? Old versus new perceptions of grammar and why this understanding has implication. What is that implication means? We have to be very flexible when assessing our students' language. Complete attention should not be only to grammar. Grammar is only part. That is the most important message for all of us to understand in the classroom on daily basis. All right. Next. So there are certain things that we need to understand about learning grammar. When somebody has to learn grammar, this learning can happen in two ways, consciously and non-consciously. Right? So we need to understand this difference. Conscious learning of grammar means when you are teaching it consciously, your learners are learning it consciously. In the sense, today let us talk about prepositions. What is a preposition? I will tell you definition. And then I'll give you examples. I will give you principles related to prepositions usage one by one. So that's like a formal class on prepositions. I'm directly teaching you, so you are also consciously learning. Means students will know that they are learning grammar, they are learning prepositions, etc. So for us as English teachers, our grammar classes are conscious grammar classes only, right? When you are teaching grammar. Now, but grammar can also be learned non-consciously. Please understand this. So what do you mean by non-conscious? Means you do not know that you are learning grammar. Without your conscious attention, you are learning grammar. How is it possible? As I said, by exposure. When you expose yourself to English, good, proper English, you learn the grammar automatically. That is why in mother tongue, though we don't learn grammar directly, our language is grammatical. Means grammar is there in our language. But how come we didn't learn grammar, no? Yes, that is because of non-conscious learning of grammar. So you should be aware of this. So when it comes to mother tongue, our grammar knowledge is non-conscious, isn't it? Rather than conscious. But when it comes to English, Is it conscious or non-conscious? What is your response? Type in the
Both,
chat
Very
box.
conscious. Very conscious.
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 Both
Okay.
it is.
Yeah, it
Sometimes
is not.
unknowingly they learn and sometimes
That's
they
right.
learn
That's
it
right.
purposely.
Sometimes it is non-conscious also.
It is neither conscious nor non-conscious completely. It is both. Both. Because whatever you read in grammar books and grammar classes, that is all conscious knowledge. But before this, we have developed some English proficiency, all of us has some English proficiency. Means we are able to use certain structures rightly. All that is non-conscious.
It depends on
All
the
that.
presentation.
Exactly. It depends on your education system, where you were brought up, what kind of school did you study, etc., etc. If you studied in an English medium school, your knowledge will be little conscious grammar and more of non-conscious grammar. Because in English medium schools, all the things are taught in English. So lot of exposure to English. So this percentage varies from person to person. But overall, when it comes to second language, not mother tongue, any second language, for everybody, little bit of this grammar knowledge will be conscious and little the other part will be non-conscious. It keeps varying. Especially for teachers, this conscious knowledge is more. Why? Because we have to teach students, no? We have to teach students grammar consciously. That is why this is more for teachers. Conscious learning or conscious understanding of grammar. All right. But we should know that it is possible to learn grammar non-consciously also. So these are some things we already discussed about it. You can quickly go through the points. Conscious learning means learner knows what he is learning. Learner consciously reads, listen to grammar points. Learner learns various concepts with formal explanation, definitions, and classification. This happens mostly formally. Formally means in our classroom. When you are teaching tenses as an area of grammar, that is an example of formal teaching or formal learning of grammar. Non-conscious means the learner is not aware of what he is learning. Learner is not aware. Just to exposure, he is learning unknowingly. Learner picks up grammatical usage through a natural context. Just like mother tongue, as I told you. Natural context, natural exposure. No formal input or practice is given. Right? Mostly this happens naturally, means real life usage. That is mother tongue most of the time, sometimes other tongues also. When you have exposure, you can easily learn. For example, Hindi. Typically, most of the towns, people know a little bit of Hindi in India. Because one thing is your mother tongue. The next thing is in India that is used more is Hindi, other than English. English is a foreign language. So if you exclude English, among Indian languages, the next commonly exposed language is Hindi. So most of us know a little bit of Hindi, not because we have learned Hindi from classes or dictionaries or grammar books of Hindi. No, because of exposure. More exposure, more learning. So this is one example. Real life usage is there, exposure is there, you will learn, you will pick it up, the grammar part also. Because grammar is all about using the language correctly. And when you are exposed to using a language correctly, your grammar is there, right? It's automatically taken care of. Right? And when it comes to the teaching of grammar, normally we talk about these two approaches, deductive and inductive. Most of the teachers in training programs, they would have learned, they would listen to this only because there is no third approach. Only two approaches most teachers would have heard, deductive approach and inductive approach. So what does deductive approach say? First teach the rules. First teach the rules, later provide examples so that students understand that rules. But this is considered as again an older approach. The modern approach is inductive approach. Modern linguists or educationists say inductive approach is a better approach because Examples you provide first and then ask students to deduce the rule. This is a better approach. Why? Because first priority is given to exposure, examples. Examples, nothing but words, sentences, etc. Means you are giving exposure to English usage first. Then you are asking students to deduce the rule. Okay. So these are the two approaches when it comes to teaching of grammar. But the problem is, in real classroom, no teacher is confidently or able to use these approaches. They won't tell you. Most of the teachers won't tell you. They know what is inductive, they know what is deductive. But the problem is, they still have problem with the grammar. The problem is because, see, these are just formal approaches when it comes to teaching of grammar. The problem is both of these approaches have limitations. Deductive approach as well as inductive approach. Only thing is inductive is better than deductive. One problem is you cannot teach all the grammar areas based on these deductive or inductive approaches. Some areas of grammar are not just suitable for these approaches. That is one thing. Another thing is, see, both the approaches have rules. That is the problem. In deductive, the rules come first. In inductive, the rules come later. That is the common problem we should see. That is why these approaches, these methods will never really help us teach grammar in a better way. Because both of them have rules in them. Only thing is deductive has first. In inductive, rules come later. The third approach, is there a third approach? Yes. The third approach is usage-based approach. Usage means grammar should be taught contextually. Context means context of usage, situations of usage. You should provide students a different context. You should expose them to different communicative context. And in that context, grammar should be taught. And that too, focusing less on rules, more on usage. That is why, as I said, sticking to these terms like deductive, inductive. Okay, it's good to know these terms, but then, all of you are teaching for many years. You tell me, can somebody tell me confidently, sir, I follow deductive, I follow inductive, and I am very successfully teaching all the areas of grammar? You may be successful with one area of grammar, with one of these approaches, but not all, right? So, yeah, some of you have raised hands. Raghavendra, Kalyani.
You are now unmuted.
We use actually we use both the approaches at times.
That's right. That's right. Unknowingly, you actually use a combination of both. That's a very good point. Kalaivania, who is that? Who said that?
Kalaivani, sir. Kalaivani.
Yeah, that's very true.
Sir,
Without the knowledge, you use a combination of both these approaches naturally, automatically. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Shall I, sir?
Yeah. Sureka, madam, go ahead.
Whatever the methods we are learning in methodologies in English or any other subject, every teacher is a unique personality and they can adapt their own way, sir.
Exactly.
Which method is suitable to which context, which point, which technique, which whatever we may realize in the beginning, we don't know how to teach. But after some type of experience, we may get some exposure and how we teach that, sir.
Very good point.
Thank you.
That's a very good point because
Shall I?
many teachers, 1 minute, sir. Many teachers, they look at these theoretical aspects as the solution for their problems. No. This theory as a result is a result of lot of educational research. That's all. So these standard definitions, names of methods, names of approaches, understanding them is good, but no one method works all the time. Right? Sometimes by experience, by gaining the right experience, all of you will realize that it's a combination of these approaches is what when to use what, when not to use what. These only your experience will teach you. Nobody should tell you this. You have to learn from your experience, and that is the best learning, I would say. Yeah, next somebody wanted to talk. I stopped you, Srinivas Rao,
Yes.
Who is that?
It's me, sir. Sayyid Alavi.
Okay, Said Alavi.
Okay, sir. Sayyid Alavi.
Yeah, somebody. Said Alavi, sir, you first start. Later we'll go to Srinivas Rao. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Say, go ahead.
Okay. We have years back, means 10 or 15 years before, in Kerala, we only one deductive approach we used in our classrooms. But in the textbook, new textbook, only inductive approach is there. Even though the teachers are teaching using both this inductive and deductive approach, but in the textbook in Kerala, textbook prefers giving preference only the inductive approach.
That's right. That is what. So,
Sir, actually, this
these
is not
kind of
only in Kerala state.
expectations-
It is not only in Kerala state. It's all over, I think.
Correct. See, that's very true. See, our textbook may change, our methodologies may change. Sometimes, as Said Alavi rightly said, our textbook expects us to teach inductively. Fine. Your textbook expects you to teach inductive because inductive is better than deductive. But what I'm trying to say is, sometimes even that inductive doesn't work for certain areas of grammar. You cannot completely follow inductive. You may start with deductive and then go to inductive. For some area of grammar, you may start inductive and then go to switch on to deductive. These combinations we should always do. So don't let anybody tell you, whether it is your government, whether it is your textbook, or whether it is, the main objective is you have to teach things effectively. Your students have to learn what they are supposed to learn. As long as that is happening, don't worry about whether you are following textbook or not, whether you are following Suman Bandi's approach or not. That is not your objective. Don't listen to anybody blindly, including me, I am telling you. Right? Somebody said in RI, follow this approach. No, that is a blind approach. Listen to everybody, understand everybody, and then select what is suitable for your needs. Right? So that should be the ultimate approach which comes with experience. Don't take anybody blindly. Even if a grammar book also, Brennan Martin has something, don't take it for granted. Maybe what they have written is something applicable to their culture or their usage. Your own native context, it may not be applicable. So take everything, read everything, understand everything, but then ultimately what works for you, you only have to discover by a combination of these approaches, sir. Right? So textbooks sometimes will have mistakes also. Textbooks may impose a particular methodology, but you should understand that one particular methodology cannot always be used. It should always be a different combination of these approaches. But of course, we should know, we should be aware of these approaches, right? All right. So what I'm trying to say is most of the grammar items can be taught without following deductive or inductive, simply communicative approach. Means you have to create situations in the class where students communicate or use that structure a lot, and then they pick it up. No deductive, no inductive. Means without rules. Without talking about rules, it is possible to teach your students the usage through exposure, through practice. So in fact, that is why I'm telling you, grammar should be avoided only to the need. Of course, in high school, yes, especially if you are teaching SSLC, yes, you have to teach grammar directly, because SSLC exam has certain dedicated amount of grammar for assessment. That is a requirement, no doubt about that. But below 10th standard, like 6th, 5th, 7th, 8th, there is no public authority, right? You are the teacher, right? So you have the freedom to reduce the amount of grammar that is being assessed and rather focus more on actual production, actual practice, contextual exposure, etc., etc. So these things are more important than your teaching of grammar as a formal area. Even if you want to teach a particular grammar area, you can do that functionally. This is where we talk about functional grammar and formal grammar. So that is where we forget about inductive and deductive, we can forget. Okay. So these two things are important. Now look at the slide. Form and function. Form refers to structure, function refers to usage. So if you are focusing too much on structural knowledge, definitions, classifications, etc., you are focusing on formal grammar a lot. Rather, if you are focusing on usage a lot, then your approach is functional. So these two are approaches towards grammar, formal and functional. So I'm sure all of you will agree with me. What should be your approach in the class, formal or functional?
Functional.
Functional.
Functional more.
Functional, sir.
More.
Combination of both, sir. Combination of both.
Exactly. Combination of both, but mostly
But
functional.
usage should be more.
Yeah, mostly functional. Formal should be restricted to the need. Need means
Yes, when it is needed.
examination is testing formal grammar, teach formal grammar.
Yes.
But on the daily basis, what should be more focused? Functional. Means most of the time should be spent on functional presentation of grammatical items, which is functional grammar. I've seen many teachers who know that there are two types of grammar, formal grammar, functional grammar, but they don't know the actual difference. So that is why we are talking about. This is a very important difference that we should know. So formal grammar means you are focusing more on the structures, names, classifications, definitions. That is formal grammar. Whereas functional grammar is, for example, formal grammar, I'll give you one example. Formal grammar means, for example, present continuous tense. Present continuous tense is used to talk about ongoing action. It begins with structure. Sentence structure is subject plus V1 plus ing form. This is formal knowledge. Students don't need this knowledge. Without knowing this, if the student has learned how to talk about an ongoing action, for example, what are you doing now? I am listening. I am talking. If the student is able to make sentences like this without knowing the definition of present continuous tense, without knowing that ing form is the verb form, all these things he doesn't have to. So without knowing that, if the student can learn, that is functional approach. But if you start if you start the class by a little formal knowledge, then you move on to functional. That is also okay. So nobody should tell you what is right. Your common sense is enough to decide how you start. You start with form first and then function, or sometimes functional and then you can teach the formal aspects. But then, as I said, overall focus should be more on functional way of teaching. Formal knowledge should be limited to the need. Then that need is decided only by you, not your textbook, not your government, not the diet lecturer, or not some RIE lecturer. Please understand this. Right, so these were some theoretical aspects that I wanted to discuss. These are very important because though we did not discuss any concrete grammar in today's class, these basics are very, very important. Because many teachers would have heard about them, but they wouldn't have understood the implications of understanding these aspects. That is why I spent one whole session on discussing these things. Hope you have got some understanding, some light on these aspects, right? With that hope, we will conclude today's class and we will continue the session in the next grammar class. All right? So nice meeting all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Very valuable session, sir.
Okay, nice.
Thank you. Nice of you.
Thank you.
Nice
you
to
so
know
much,
that.
sir.
Thank you,
Nice
sir.
to know that.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much,
you.
sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Very informative, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for letting me.
Informative and it was very meaningful, sir. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Fantabulous,
See you.
sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right. See you in the next class. See you in the next
Thank you,
class.
sir.
Thank you,
Please take a short break and come back in 5 minutes for the next class.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm switching off my video now.